I'm Jason Takhtadjian with Armenian Sports News, and I have a very special guest with me today. Her name is Leslie Korkgy-Valenti, and we're here to talk about softball and the sport possibly coming to Armenia. So, first and foremost, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much.
So you have an extensive softball history, both as a player and as a coach, over 3 decades. As you made your name in the East Coast, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, all over. Now you have All Stars, which is your own facility. And I want to
Yes.
first just talk about your background with softball, how you got introduced to the sport, and kind of what you're doing now with All Stars.
Okay. When I was really little, my father played men's slow pitch softball. So probably since the time I was in a stroller, I would be at his games. And before you knew it, through elementary school, he'd say, "Come on, let's go to the field," and he taught me how to throw and catch and hit. And it just something really it was just a beautiful thing between he and I, to go to the field, to have that experience as a father and daughter, that bond. And that's what I try to bring at the facility. I try to, my facility, focus on that because a lot of the dads come in with their daughters and it just reminds me of me and my dad. And I started playing in fourth grade, I guess it was like local town softball. And then by the time I was in eighth grade, I had went, and believe it or not, this is an interesting point. I went to a softball camp, and the woman who ran it, her name was Roz Bostonian. In Armenia, yeah, my mom found the ad. This was like 19, I don't know, 87. She found the ad in the Bergen Record, because there was no internet. And she's like, "Oh my God, this lady's Armenian. You got to go to her camp." I'm like, Okay." So it wasn't too far from our home. It was at Ramapo College. So it was like a half hour away. And she was a women's windmill pitcher, back in I guess it was the 60s and 70s. I believe she played for the Budweiser Bells. And I went up to her, I think probably the second to last day, and I said, "Oh, I'd like to try pitching." And she's like, "Okay, you do this, you do this." And I started doing it and I really loved it. And when I got home, I told my dad, I'm like, "I think I want to go to the field and keep trying this." So that's basically, and we had a field right around the block from our house. So we were always there. That's all we ever did.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to get into, you
Yeah.
know, Armenian softball, the fact that you want to introduce the
Mm,
sport to the country. But before I do that, I
yeah.
want to talk about your background, your Armenian background, your heritage. I want to talk about just how important that's been, kind of,
Oh,
where your
man.
family comes from, and the fact that, again, you talking about, seeing another Armenian name and gravitating towards that, especially when it comes to softball.
Yeah, that I think, now that I think about it, kind of I maybe had a lot just to do with this whole journey and starting off with another Armenian. And if I can, at the towards the end of my career here, I mean, I'm not getting any younger. And I'd love to keep doing this forever and ever, but there comes a point when, you start looking at some other things with the sport. Because for 25 years I've done instruction, and I've spent time working one-on-one with kids, and then over time moving on to other things. But yes, my heritage, I guess, just always being very proud of who we are, where we come from. Well, obviously the stories of what our families went through to come here. And I guess it just really made me very strong. My grandmothers would always tell us stories, as they're giving us chudak, they're telling us stories about the massacre. And it's like, okay, but you hear these stories over and over again. And when you hear things like my great grandmother had to step over her sister who died in front of her on a death march to Lake Von, it puts a lot of things in perspective. And hearing what my father told me about what happened to his side of the family, and, men being taken and never seen again. And to think my great grandmother put my grandmother, uncle, and aunt in a wagon and escaped from Diyarbakir, Turkey, and rode all night for I don't know how long to Syria. It made me feel very strong. So when I played softball, just in my little head, I just thought of that. I thought of it a lot, as maybe corny as that sounds. I just, I put a lot of passion into what I did because I was like, wow, I'm here. They got us here, and I just want to do something great. I don't want to waste that opportunity. And I thought it the same way with my schoolwork and with my family. So it very much an impact on who I am.
Absolutely. I mean, the story of
And I was a world
perseverance,
history teacher too for high school. So I used to teach all about it. So
right? You
yeah,
made sure that the kids knew about the Armenian genocide.
100%.
So that story of perseverance, it's very, common within all these other Armenian communities, Armenian families, especially in the diaspora. And,
Yes,
parlaying that into softball and your desire to bring that sport to Armenia, a sport that's not really from that country. You don't really hear about even baseball in that country or
right.
that part of the world, rather. What
Correct.
would you say kind of, moved you towards the idea of introducing that sport? Kind of what sparked that? You talking about, your family's, history, and then just everything that you've experienced, here in the States. Just what has driven you to want to bring that sport to Armenians?
So it definitely was a very recent idea that sort of hit me. I've done some traveling. One of the girls who I train, who works at my facility, she played in Puerto Rico. I got on a plane. I surprised her. I went down to watch her play, and I was like, "Oh, this is fun. Travel, softball." And then just this past summer, I was in the Czech Republic for the European Championships, the under 18 European Championships, because once again, a student of mine who I trained when she was, I believe, 8 years old, she plays for the under 18 Irish national team. And I surprised her at the airport. So here I was in the Czech Republic, and I'm sitting in the bleachers. Nobody's really from the US. But I started hearing some people speaking in English, and caught my attention, and it was a family from Greece. So we started talking, and they ended up putting me in contact with some of the people with the Greek national program. And the one gentleman, his name is Tom. He's with, I think, the Greek national baseball team. So I had some correspondence back and forth because I'm also part Greek. So as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, you know what? This would be like really cool to try to just go to Armenia with it. And yes, there's not much around with softball. I think Turkey has, they've dabbled in it a little bit, Cyprus a little bit, Georgia a little bit. But yeah, it's not, the next place you look is to Asia. So we're right in the middle. It's very strong in Europe, and then sort of where we are, it's not. And I just figured, why not? Maybe there's a way we could try it. Maybe there's a way we could get a group of us to bring equipment. I know plenty of people who'd like to get rid of equipment, and just get something started. So in the Czech Republic, being exposed to meeting people from the Israeli national team, from all these teams, Ukraine, I mean, they're in the middle of a war and they had kids there. It was inspiring. So that, I think it was just more of that, just feeling that inspiration of being in Europe among so many wonderful cultures, meeting so many awesome kids from different countries. And I was like, why can't we try this? And
Right,
it may take a long time, but just an introduction may do something.
right. And how do you plan on introducing the sport to Armenia?
You know, um, so yeah, that's I think that's why I ended up reaching out to Armenian Sports Network or news, because I figured if I could bring some attention to it, I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who are Armenian who've played baseball and softball. I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I'm sure there might be somebody else out there with the same idea. And if it's a way to network and just get the ball rolling. However, I do have another idea. They have a hybrid sport that they're playing throughout Europe, parts of Africa, Asia. It's called Baseball 5, and it's fascinating. And what it is you don't need any equipment. It's a mush ball, and it's actually co-ed, so it's a safe environment. It's like when kids in the US are in gym class, there's boys and girls playing. You have a unit in wiffle ball or stickball or whatever. So they play this in on like a basketball court, and it's very much, it's just a small little, they've got bases, it's 5 people per team, baseball 5, and you basically hit the ball with your hand. So you're learning, yeah, so it's like a
Interesting.
handball.
Yeah.
They still field it, they still throw it, but they're learning really the core concepts of baseball and softball. And it's when I went on to the World Baseball and Softball Confederation website and did a little research in it, they say it was created to bring the concept to countries where this is not going to be an easy thing to bring, the sport of softball and baseball. The equipment, I mean, it's complicated. There's a reason why most countries you see soccer, volleyball, basketball. It's simple. It's simpler in terms of the setup. You
Hmm.
get kids on a field, they're kicking a ball around, they make 2 makeshift goals. Softball, okay, you need someone to pitch, you need the catching equipment, you need bats, you need there's so many, and that's why I think it's been difficult to get it into so many other parts of the world. But this baseball 5 is fascinating. And they just played, I believe it was in I want to say either, I think Ankara, Turkey. They had a huge tournament. And it's many countries have the sport, and it's helping to bring baseball and softball to those countries in a really simple and safe and really relatively inexpensive way.
Right.
So that's sort of what I was thinking about as I was saying to myself, yeah, how am I going to do this? You know? Yeah, well, it was a great idea, but how.
Right.
So
I mean, I think it's a great idea. I want to ask you though, why
yes,
do you believe that softball, and why do you think that softball will, be successful in a country like Armenia?
it's different. It's very much representative of who we are here in the West. It's such an American sport, but yet it is played throughout the world with such passion. And when I was in the Czech Republic and I saw how girls from the Ukraine, I'm thinking their country is in the middle of a horrible war. And then, of course, seeing the Israeli national team, obviously that was prior to October 7th, but also to see that, these are kids that come from parts of the world where this is not like on the front of any, in the front of anybody's mind. And yet imagine bringing something kind of complex and sophisticated and introducing it to kids that are probably thinking nobody would want to do that here. Like, they're not going to think of us playing that sport. Well, why not? And Greece has been at it since the early 2000s. And yes, it's been about 23 years. But if you think of it, when they started really developing it in the early 2000s, I mean, now we have the internet, social media, maybe it'll take us 5 to 10 years. But I just feel like they deserve the opportunity to get a bat in their hand and hit a ball and play catch. There's just something very magical about it. I don't know how else to say it. It may sound a little corny, but I go right back to my roots with my dad and him really instilling hard work. And it's not an easy sport. It's hard. I mean, every sport's different and unique. We can't compare them, but it is a complicated sport. Got to get bats, got to get gloves, got to get cleats. I was listening to people from Denmark. Now, this is interesting. You figure Denmark, you're right in the heart of modern Europe, right? They're saying that they have a hard time getting equipment. They're like, Amazon really doesn't just show up and deliver. And they have to go to other countries to get sporting goods. So could you, I mean, so yeah, this is like definitely going to be a little tough, but like, I don't know. I'm just really tempted. But I think the baseball 5 could be a really great way to introduce boys and girls to both baseball and softball. And it's, if you go on the website for the WBSC and you watch the videos of it, it is so cool.
That
It
is
is
really
really
neat.
cool.
That is really neat, and hopefully one of these days, sooner than
Yeah,
later, right, we get to see softball or baseball 5 or a rendition of the sport introduced to
sure.
Armenia.
We got to find the Armenians out there who've played softball and baseball And I even believe there's a new owner. He's one of the Yankee owners. I just saw him on Instagram, and he's Armenian and Assyrian.
Patrick Bet
Um,
David.
Yes, that's the name. And I
Yeah.
mean, I think there's so many great things we could do. Yes, it's a dream right now. I didn't get to meet some great people in Europe that I can reach out to that maybe could help us start with baseball 5, just to get it there and to not have it be so overwhelming or intimidating, the process of learning it. But that's definitely a sport that's having some success. It's a hybrid sport, and I think that could be really cool. But my goal is to get girls windmilling up there. Yep,
That'd be
and I'll
amazing,
do it.
especially just to get more girls, more women involved in sports,
Yeah,
especially for Armenia.
yeah. And last thing, the one thing I will say is a lot of the countries, European countries, they do have a lot of American players. Um, who have obviously citizenship for those countries that can play then on the national teams. So a lot of the players for, let's say, the Greek national team, a lot of them come from, I believe, Canada, but mainly the U.S., and some from Greece. It's Greece proper. So that's the other thing to look at. You could essentially find college girls who have had college experience through the U.S. who have the Nash, who are Armenian, who could or may very well have their citizenship, and that's another way of starting a national team. So if you can
Absolutely.
inspire, go from the top, start at the top and say, hey, we've got 80% of them are from the United States and Canada, and then we teach a percentage in Armenia, and you go to your first tournament, win, lose, or draw. Now you're on the map.
Absolutely. Well, Leslie, I think that's
Yeah.
all the time we got. Thank you so much for joining
Thank
me,
you.
and I'm looking forward to seeing softball in Armenia.
Thank you. Me too. Have a great Christmas.